So, what pushes us out of the plane? If being on this second half of life journey isn't about turning 50 or turning 65 or retiring, what exactly is it that is the kicker that kicks us onto this journey, sometimes kicking and screaming? It can be very difficult. So, why don't we talk about that? Hi, my name is Jeanette Slater, and we are talking about this journey, this further journey into second half of life. So today we're going to be talking about what kicks us into second half of life, because it can often be very painful. It can be a rude awakening, and we need others to journey with us. So let's see where this takes us. This is a change journey. And with a change journey, there's three parts. There's the happening, the incident, the change in situation that makes us say staying where we are is no longer possible for one reason or another. And it's second level change, which is to say you're not going back. We have to go forward. So the first part of this journey is that oops, that oh no, that says life is no longer going to be the same. And then we make the choice to step onto the journey into the second part. And the second part of the journey is kind of no man's land, the wilderness, as the children of Israel found out for 40 years. And it's shifting sand. We're not sure exactly where to stand. Things aren't the way they were. And the final part of the journey is when we eventually come to the promised land. We come to a place where we do feel like we know where to stand, and we can settle into our new second half of life. But most of this channel is going to be about the first and second part of that journey. So let's go back to the first part of that journey. This is where things are starting to shift, things are starting to change, and we're no longer feeling like maybe this is home. We're no longer feeling like we can just operate as usual. And usually, very often, there is something that kind of kickstarts the whole thing. And it's a number of things, depending on our own life and the journey we've already been on. So I want to just itemize a couple things that could be kickers for you. Again, we're all different. We each have a unique journey, but these are some that I've heard either experienced or heard other friends talking about. So first of all, maybe the loss of a job. That also happened to me, where someone I had been working with for 15 years said, I think this isn't working anymore. That was really tough for me. I'd never been released from a job before. It was always my choice. And that, again, is this thing about second half of life, is a lot of times these changes aren't ones we choose. They come at us, and we have to know how to deal with that. So the loss of a job could be a kicker for you. Another one is maybe the loss of a close relationship. That was also one of my kickers. A relationship that you thought was solid, was going to go out throughout your life, and there's a shift and a change, either in you or in them or the situation, and all of a sudden those are no longer your best friends. Like I've heard of friends, many friends, who say they had some really good friends in first half of life. They thought they would be friends forever. And then they found out when all the children left home, they were mostly friends because their children were friends. And once the children were gone, they really didn't have all that much in common. That can shake your world. Maybe it was a move to a new community. That also happened to me. But sometimes people will move to follow their children, or maybe they'll move for another job, and or their spouse will move for a job, and it upends your life. So that can be a huge kicker into second half of life. Becoming a grandparent or losing your parents. When you begin to feel like, oh, I am moving into a totally different stage of life as a grandparent and not as a parent. And what's my role in this? And what does that look like? And can I even accept the label of grandparent? That only happens to people who are old, right? So that can be a life-shaking event. Or if you lose your parents and you realize you are now the oldest generation. That can be kind of shaking for you if you're not quite ready for it. Retirement can kick us into second half of life, especially if our job has been a big part of our identity. That can feel very shaking when we're no longer on the job 8 to 5. What are we doing with our life? Some of us have no problem filling up the time, but there's other people who just feel like they're footloose and not fancy free, and they're not quite sure where to stand. So that can be a huge shift that causes us to re-ask the questions of life. An extramarital affair, that's a hard one, either from you or your spouse or a trusted friend. That can make a huge shift. It's just life shaking. And how we come out of that at the other end, we're never going back. Even if the friendship or the marriage stays together, it's still a huge shift. On the positive side, sometimes a new opportunity opens up which we didn't really even expect. And as we step onto that journey, we realize everything is beginning to shift. And our health status, either ourselves or our spouse, that can make a huge difference. I had a lot of health shifts as I turned 50, as I turned 60, and it was shocking to me because I have always been a very healthy person. I've just never had any big health issues. And to have my body betray me like that, that was shaking to me. And I realized I'm never going back. I'm never going to be my 30-year-old, 40-year-old, and even, frankly, 50-year-old that hiked the Grand Canyon. I'm not going to be doing that anymore. I had to let go of that. But that was a shift that I had to internalize and say, what does this mean for life in the future? Because I am never going back to what I was. So some of these are even changes that we expected. We expected to retire. We expected our children to leave home. Even some of those shifts that we were actually working toward, when they actually happen, it shakes us to the core. I know friends who have lost their parents, and even though they knew that their parents' health was failing, when their parent died, it just shook them to the core. So it's not always unexpected things that come at us. Sometimes it's just the normal progression of life, and yet how we respond to it, it just shakes us. So we have to recognize those things as important and not just pass them off and say, oh, well, it'll all be okay. It will be okay, but we have work to do in the meantime. So I would call these wake-up events, things that wake us up to a new reality. The ground is shifting, and now what are we going to do? Often it's just a lot of little things in a row that then begin to shake our confidence in our ability to know how to handle life. It's sometimes there's an initial big shock and then a lot of little aftershocks. So I was in California in 1994 when they had that huge earthquake in Southern California where roads were collapsing, and it was terrifying. It happened in the middle of the night, and I'd never been in an earthquake. And here, the whole building I was in was shaking. I woke up, I sat up in bed, I leaned against the wall because I thought if the ceiling falls in, I want to be against the wall. And, eventually, what felt like forever, it was probably only a half a minute, everything settled down. And we kind of breathed a sigh of relief. But you know what? The whole rest of the night and into the next day, there were a lot of little aftershocks that started shaking my world. And every time there was an aftershock, I braced myself because I thought, is this another big one or an even bigger one? So that was very shaking. When the earth around you is no longer stable, that is a very shaking experience. And moving into second half of life can be like that. We experience one initial big shock, and then there's little aftershocks, the ripple effect that comes afterwards. Or sometimes there's a second big shock that comes along, those wake-up events. And a lot of times they seem like they shouldn't be that big of a deal. And maybe even some of your friends are like, oh, well, just get on with life. And yet somehow that event for you shakes you to the core. First of all, I want to say you're in good company. If you're feeling this way, if you're feeling some uncomfortable shifts in your life, you are on the right track. Yes, you are on the right track. So that was a word that came to me that was just so helpful to recognize that this was part of the journey. This was not me getting off track. This was me staying on track. And the questions that came up through that, I began to recognize them as questions that would help me grow rather than help questions that were stopping my life from happening. So pay attention. If you're feeling some of those big shocks or the little mini aftershocks, pay attention to those and say, what's going on here? What's shaking in me? Is it my identity? Is it an idea I had that I thought was sacred, that would never move in my life? What is it that feels uncomfortable? Recognize that, pay attention to it. Do some journaling, talk with some friends who maybe are experiencing some of the same thing. Then notice your response to that. How are you responding? Are you responding with your brakes on, saying, no, 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 not going down that road? Are you responding with curiosity? Like, this is something new. This is something I can learn from. If you're curious, you can learn from these things. So I want to encourage you, rather than putting on the brakes, open up your curiosity to what these changes are engendering in you. And then ask yourself, what is the invitation? What's the positive invitation in this shift and change that I'm experiencing? And how do I want to respond to that invitation? Is the response, no, I'm not going there? Or might you just hold it in an open hand to say, I wonder what's going on here? And just holding it open without having to make any judgments or any decisions about direction, just holding it open. Or is the invitation to let go, to lay something down? Maybe something you've been carrying for a long time. Or maybe it's laying down a paradigm or a thought process that has ruled your world. And now you realize that's not the way my life is working anymore. That's not helpful. I need to lay that down. So what do you need to release in order to say yes to that invitation in some way? then as you listen to the invitation into a new journey, a new walk in life, think about how you want to respond. How do you want to show up in this time in your life? Maybe it's a totally new role that is going to be different than the one you had in first half of life. Maybe in first half of life, you were the change agent. You were the ones that made things happen. And maybe in second half of life, you're the one that's cheering other people on. That could be a huge role shift that I had to look at and accept, that I was no longer the one making things happen. I was the one cheering on those and supporting those who are making things happen. So what is your response? How are you going to engage this next part of the journey? How are you going to be? How are you going to show up in this next journey? One of the shocking things in this second half of life journey is that others are impacted by this, and they may not like the changes that you're going through. They may keep silent, or they may try to talk you out of it and say, no, just let's go back to what we always believed. Let's go back to the way it always was. And so you don't always have support from the people who are closest to you. Now, friends who have had a little distance, sometimes they become your best people to hang out with and talk to, because they're not so invested in the way you were, and they're more open to see changes in your life. So consider who you need to bring along on this journey. Who's going to walk with you? Who's going to be supportive of the changes that you know you need to make? Who can even help you brainstorm and think through what the right questions are? I was a coach for many years, still am in a lot of different ways. And one thing we learned is that coaches don't tell you how to do something. Coaches help you ask the right questions. Because if you aren't asking the right questions, it's really difficult to find the right answers. So find friends who can help you ask the right questions for this stage of your journey. The start of this further journey can be kind of rough, but trust me, there are so many joys, so many opportunities that are going to be coming your way if you decide to go on this journey. If you decide to find the courage to say yes to the invitations that are being extended to you. So I want to encourage you, keep looking for the joys. Be grateful for the life you've had. Be grateful that you're on the right track, even when it's tough, even when it's challenging, even when it's confusing. Be grateful. So if you want to stay on this journey, why don't you put on your walking shoes and let's go. And of course, if you found it valuable, share it with your friends, like it, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, because we've got a lot of things to talk about. So come on, let's go on this journey together.